Home alone, but you're never really alone. The pitter-patter of little feet, the slam of a door echoing through an empty hallway. Being home alone can be unnerving, even terrifying. Our minds race, conjuring shadows and whispers in the dark. But what if those whispers weren't just in our heads? What if the fear we feel when we're alone stems from something real, something sinister, lurking just beyond our sight? Tonight, we delve into two disturbing, true stories of individuals left home alone, only to find that they weren't as alone as they thought. Picture this: a sprawling, ancient manor, shrouded in an almost palpable silence. The kind of silence that seems to echo with the whispers of the past, where every creak and groan tells a story of its own. The air hangs heavy, thick with the scent of dust and decay, a testament to years of neglect. Cobwebs drape the corners like ghostly curtains, and the once grand furniture now stands as mere shadows of their former selves. Moonlight spills through grimy windows, casting long dancing shadows across the threadbare carpets and faded portraits lining the walls. The light seems to breathe life into the otherwise lifeless interior, creating an eerie, almost surreal atmosphere. Each portrait seems to watch you with hollow eyes, their painted smiles somehow more menacing than comforting. It's as if the very walls of the manor are alive, bearing witness to countless untold stories and secrets. Our story takes us deep into the heart of this forgotten mansion, where a young boy named Alex finds himself utterly alone. The vast emptiness of the manor seems to swallow him whole, amplifying his every movement and breath. His parents are away, called out of town on urgent business, leaving him in the care of the ancient manor itself. The house, with its creaking floors and whispering walls, becomes both his guardian and his tormentor. The silence is the first thing that gets to him. It's not a peaceful quiet, but a suffocating stillness, broken only by the occasional groan of the old house settling around him. Every sound seems amplified, echoing through the empty halls. As the hours tick by, the shadows seem to lengthen, stretching out like grasping claws from every dark corner. The once familiar rooms now feel like a labyrinth of fear and uncertainty. The creaking of floorboards beneath his feet echoes like phantom footsteps, and the rustling of leaves against his window sounds like whispered threats. Each noise sends a shiver down his spine, making him question what is real and what is imagined. Alex tries to distract himself, to lose himself in a book, but the words blur together, his mind unable to shake the growing unease. The stories he reads seem to merge with the reality around him, creating a tapestry of fear and suspense. He tells himself it's just the old house playing tricks on his imagination, but deep down, a primal fear begins to take root. It's a fear that transcends logic, a fear of the unknown and the unseen. He starts to notice things, small at first, easily dismissed. A flicker of movement in the corner of his eye, a shadow that seems to shift when he's not looking directly at it. A flicker of movement in the reflection of a dusty mirror, a fleeting glimpse of something that shouldn't be there. His mind races, trying to rationalize the irrational, a faint chill that seems to follow him from room to room, as if an unseen presence is always just a step behind. The temperature drops and he can see his breath misting in the air. His heart pounds in his chest, each beat a frantic drum against the suffocating silence. The fear is almost tangible, wrapping around him like a cold, clammy shroud. One night, as Alex huddles beneath his blankets, desperately trying to ignore the growing sense of dread, he hears it. A sound that cuts through the silence like a knife, sending a jolt of terror through his body. A soft, almost inaudible sound, like someone dragging their feet across the wooden floor just outside his bedroom door. The sound is faint but unmistakable, and it fills him with a sense of impending doom. His breath catches in his throat, and he holds it, listening intently. Every muscle in his body tenses as he strains to hear any further movement. The sound comes again, closer this time, accompanied by the distinct creak of his bedroom door, slowly, agonizingly, swinging open. The door moves with a deliberate slowness as if taunting him. Terror grips him, paralyzing him with fear. He wants to scream, to run, but his voice is trapped in his throat, his body frozen in place. The fear is overwhelming, a primal instinct that roots him to the spot. The moonlight from the hallway spills into his room, casting an elongated shadow that stretches across the floor, reaching towards his bed. The shadow seems to move with a life of its own, creeping ever closer. And in that shadow he sees it, a figure tall and gaunt, its features obscured by the darkness. The figure stands motionless, its presence a dark blot on the moonlit floor. It stands there unmoving, its presence radiating an aura of malice that chills him to the bone. The air around it seems to thrum with a dark energy, a palpable sense of evil. Time seems to stand still. Alex can only stare, his eyes wide with terror as the figure takes a step closer and the shadow stretches further, reaching out, reaching for him. The darkness seems to close in and Alex knows that whatever happens next, his life will never be the same. Our second story takes us from the decaying grandeur of the old manor to the seemingly ordinary setting of a suburban home. A place where tranquility usually reigns, but tonight the storm outside mirrors the turmoil within. But don't let the familiar surroundings fool you, for even within these walls, darkness festers. The kind of darkness that seeps into the corners of your mind, making you question every shadow. We meet Sarah, a teenager left home alone on a stormy Friday night. Her parents are away for the weekend, leaving her to fend for herself in the eerie silence of the house. The wind howls outside, a symphony of eerie whistles and groans, while inside Sarah tries to ignore the unsettling feeling that she's being watched. The storm outside seems to amplify every creak and groan of the house. It starts subtly, a prickling sensation at the back of her neck, the feeling of eyes on her even when she's alone. She tries to shake it off, but the feeling lingers, growing stronger with each passing minute. She dismisses it as nerves, the product of her overactive imagination fueled by the storm raging outside. But deep down, she knows something isn't right. But as the night wears on, the feeling intensifies, becoming impossible to ignore. The shadows seem to grow longer, darker, and more menacing. The basement, with its damp, musty air and flickering fluorescent lights, is where the feeling is strongest. It's a place she avoids, a place that seems to hold its own secrets. Sarah avoids it as much as possible, but the old TV in the corner has been acting up, randomly turning itself on and off, and her dad asked her to check the fuse box. She knows she has to go down there, despite her growing dread. Armed with a flashlight and her growing unease, Sarah descends the creaking basement stairs, each step sending shivers down her spine. The stairs seem to groan under her weight, as if protesting her descent. The air grows colder as she descends, and the smell of damp earth and mildew fills her nostrils. It's a smell that seems to cling to her, making her feel even more uneasy. The flickering light from her flashlight dances across the cluttered basement, creating an eerie play of light and shadow. Every object seems to take on a sinister shape in the dim light. She finds the fuse box and fiddles with the switches, her heart pounding in her chest. The sound of her own heartbeat seems to echo in the silent basement. The old TV flickers to life, its screen filled with static and the faint hum of white noise. The sound is almost hypnotic, drawing her attention. As she turns to leave, she catches a glimpse of something in the reflection of the TV screen. A shadow, darker than the surrounding darkness, seems to move on its own. A shadow, darker than the surrounding darkness, seems to detach itself from the wall, slithering across the floor towards her. It's a sight that makes her blood run cold. She whirls around, her flashlight beam cutting through the darkness, but there's nothing there. Just the oppressive silence and the feeling of being watched. Just the cluttered workbench, the dusty boxes and the old TV, its screen now blank. The basement seems to mock her fear, its silence almost taunting. Shaking off the chills that run down her spine, Sarah tells herself it was just her imagination. But the feeling of unease lingers, refusing to be dismissed so easily. But as she climbs the stairs, she can't shake the feeling that something is wrong, that something is watching her from the shadows. Each step feels like a struggle against an unseen force. Back upstairs, she tries to distract herself, but the feeling of unease persists. She turns on the TV, hoping the noise will drown out her fear, but it only seems to amplify it. Every creak of the house, every gust of wind against the windows sends her heart racing. The storm outside seems to be a living entity, conspiring with the shadows inside. She finds herself constantly looking over her shoulder, her senses on high alert. Every shadow seems to move, every sound seems to whisper her name. Later that night, as she lies in bed trying to ignore the storm raging outside and the fear gnawing at her insides, she hears it. A sound that makes her blood run cold. A soft scratching sound coming from beneath her bed. Her blood runs cold. The sound is slow and deliberate, like something trying to get her attention. The scratching continues, slow and deliberate, like claws dragging across the wooden floorboards. It's a sound that seems to echo in her mind, growing louder with each passing second. Paralyzed with fear, Sarah pulls the blankets over her head, her breath coming in short, panicked gasps. The scratching stops, but the silence is even more terrifying. Silence descends, heavy and suffocating. It's a silence that seems to press down on her, making it hard to breathe. Just when she thinks it's over, she feels it. A presence, cold and malevolent, hovering just above her. A cold, clammy hand slowly pulling back the blankets from her face. It's a touch that sends a jolt of terror through her body. She screams, a primal sound of terror that echoes through the empty house. It's a scream that seems to pierce the very fabric of the night. The hand disappears, and silence returns, broken only by the pounding of her own heart. It's a silence that seems to mock her fear, leaving her feeling more alone than ever. She doesn't dare look, doesn't dare move until the first rays of dawn peek through her window, chasing away the shadows and the terror of the long, dark night. Only then does she feel a semblance of safety, as the light banishes the darkness that had haunted her. These stories, though unsettling, serve as a chilling reminder that sometimes the things that go bump in the night are more than just figments of our imagination. They can be echoes of something more sinister, lurking just out of sight. When the lights are out and we're alone with our thoughts, the silence can be deafening. The line between reality and nightmare can blur, creating a sense of unease that is hard to shake off, leaving us vulnerable to the unseen forces that lurk in the shadows. These forces feed on our fear and uncertainty. So the next time you find yourself home alone, remember Alex and Sarah, who experienced the inexplicable. Remember that the fear you feel, the sense of being watched, the prickling sensation on the back of your neck, the cold shiver down your spine, the shadows that seem to move in the corner of your eye, might be more than just your imagination playing tricks. You might not be as alone as you think. The unknown can be closer than you ever imagined. So stay vigilant and trust your instincts.